What's up guys, Kyle here again, and welcome back to another episode of FAQ'N Friday. First question comes from Hugo Welty, and he asks, question for next Friday, how do you find the EVH LBX compares to the LBX Stealth? Thank you for your question very much, man, I appreciate you. So the first difference right off the bat is the original LBX has the blue channel and the red channel, whereas the LBX Stealth has a green or a clean channel and the red channel. Now the clean channel is it's clean to a point, but then it starts to get break up and you can get some kind of crunchy tones out of it, as I showed in my demo that I posted of the amp a long time ago. I'll put that somewhere up here or something if I can figure out how to do that. But yeah, that's the main difference. And that's a pretty big difference to me because I don't need a clean channel, and I love the fact that the original LBX has the blue channel, which is my personal favorite of the EVH stuff, and it's the only lunchbox head that features the blue channel. But you get the red channel too, and you can switch back and forth between the two. So me being the belligerent amateur that I am, I much prefer having both different gain channels. Besides that, the Stealth is a little bit more compressed. It's a little scoopier in the mids on that red channel. And then the biggest difference as far as controls and everything go is the Stealth has a much better master volume taper. I don't know why EVH did this with the first two LBX amps, but they made the master volume taper horrible. Like, it's just loud right off the bat. And people who are buying 15-watt lunchbox amps more than likely are not buying them to play them loud. They're buying them because they're limited on space, they're limited on volume, so they want something that's gonna work well in a home setting, that's gonna sound good at lower volumes, and they just, you know, they made the master volume taper suck on that thing, in my opinion. When people ask me if they should get an LBX when they have a 50-watt EVH, I tell them no, because the master volume taper on the 50-watt heads is much better than it is on the first two lunchbox versions. Now the Stealth is the exception. The Stealth has a really good master volume taper. It really doesn't even start to get loud until you're above noon, and then it comes on fairly quick after that. But yeah, that's how it should have been on the previous models, in my opinion. The fact that the master volume comes on so quickly on those doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But yeah, the voicing differences are small between the original lunchbox and the lunchbox Stealth amps. It's really just the different feature set, the concentric pots on the Stealth, the better master volume taper, and the ever so slightly different voicing on the red channel. So yeah, hope that helps you figure out which one is gonna be right for you. Thanks for your question as always, here you go. All right, my man, Kevin Pumala. He's one of my Patreon members, and honestly, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce your last name, Kevin. I apologize, but you know I love you, man. He asks, if money wasn't an object and you could use anything available, what is your perfect rig for live performance? Amp, cab, guitar, the works. All right, so this is an interesting one. I mean, maybe not the best question for me because I kind of own a bunch of ridiculous amps. So obviously, you know, not to sound like an idiot, but up until recently, money wasn't really something that I had to worry about when it came to investing in guitar gear. So like, I kind of have a lot of the really top tier amps. I'm lucky to own them. I'm very fortunate. Same with guitars and stuff like that. But like, if money's not an object and I don't have to worry about things being stolen, which is now what I worry about, like when I take expensive stuff to gigs, like I will play my expensive stuff out. I have no problem getting bumps and Tolex or scratches or dings on guitars or anything like that. That stuff doesn't bother me. These things, in my opinion, my personal view is instruments, amps, they're meant to be played. They're meant to be used. And no matter how much they cost, unless they were built specifically for the purpose of being a collector's item, which really is few and far between with gear, they're meant to be used and abused, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I played my 58 reissue Gibson Les Paul out many times. I purposely have not been wiping it down after shows and stuff like that, which, you know, kind of gross because it's sweat that's sitting on the guitar, but I'm kind of trying to age that guitar naturally by just playing it and not cleaning it. So I've played that guitar, and that's a really expensive guitar, out many times and never even hesitated to bring it unless I was going somewhere where I was unfamiliar with the venue, unfamiliar with the city, or people that we were gonna be there with. In that case, I'll bring something cheaper like one of my studios or something, and that's just because I don't want it to get stolen or go missing. But yeah, I've got no problem playing my expensive gear out. I would have to say it would pretty much be the rig that I used for Bushido Code's CD release show a couple of months ago. I played the Mesobarba Trinity, my Splawn Pro Stock 6550, and my white 1991 Gibson Explorer. The cab that I used was a Mesa 412 traditional cab. Ideally, I would be able to bring 2 cabs and go, you know, full dickhead style. And if that were the case, I would probably bring my Splawn cab for the Splawn amp, because the speakers that I have in there pair really well. It's got the G12M 65s up top, V30s on the bottom. And then I would use that Mesa cab with the Mesobarba, because the Mesa cabs tend to have a little bit rounder mids, and the Mesobarba is kind of a spiky amp in the mid frequencies, so like it kind of rounds those mids out a little bit more, which I think the Mesobarba can definitely benefit from. So yeah, I basically get to play a dream rig live anytime I want to, and I'm extremely fortunate for that. So that would probably be it. And if you want to tally up how much that's worth, even on the used market, it's approaching $8,000 to $9,000 in gear. Ooh, when I think about it, it's kind of ridiculous, especially because I could get away with using like a PV6505 and a XXX and a couple of the old vintage PV cabs and my beat up Les Paul Studio, and my whole rig would come in at like $2,000, and I would be probably just as happy, if not just as happy. I'd be pretty close to as happy with the tones that I would get out of that rig, and it costs, you know, less than a third of the price of the ridiculous rig. Yeah, I just love gear, and regardless of price tags, I just love playing a little bit of everything. So the fact that I do get to have this really expensive stuff is really cool. The fact that your question is not a hypothetical is kind of still blows me away, that I can actually choose from a wall of amps that most people don't get to play. Makes me extremely fortunate. The whole reason that I started this channel was to be able to share all the cool stuff that I get to play that not a lot of people do, the stuff that people ask me tons of questions on, like the high-end Friedman stuff, the Dietzel stuff, the Engel, KSR, Soldano, all that stuff. I love gear, but it's not nearly as fun for me if I don't get to share in the experience with other people. I mean, playing amps by yourself is cool, but playing in a band is much cooler, and playing in a band that plays shows out is even better. And even better than that, playing a show where there are a couple gear nerds there that come up and talk to you about your stuff afterwards. That's like the most fun for me. So yeah, just so you know, like the reason that I started this channel was because I had all this really cool gear that I didn't get to share with people, and my enjoyment comes in sharing this stuff with other people. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to tack that on the end of your question. I'm not really sure why. Maybe because when I think about questions like that, I realize how fortunate I am, because sometimes you do take it for granted. But yeah, I just want you guys to know that I appreciate you being here and sharing the experiences that we're having on this channel together. Next question. All right, this question comes from Stuart Kerr. He asks, what do you think is the best affordable valve amp for high gain? I mean, under 500 pounds, or for you, $700, what would be the most affordable 212 to pair with it? Thinking of something that sits between for home use and live use. All right, man, so this question is maybe slightly more difficult than would have been a couple of years ago, when things were just, gear prices were at an all-time low a couple of years ago. I mean, there were certain amps that you could buy all day on the used market for $300 to $350 to $400. Triple X's, 6505s, the Jet City stuff. I mean, all those still apply, but now those prices have come up a couple $100s on each item. So the most affordable high gain amp that sounds great for me is probably, unless the prices continue to skyrocket, probably always going to be a PV6505 or a PV Triple X. There are just very few situations where I would not recommend one of those two amps in the affordable amp price range, because both amps are just tried and true killer high gain pieces that really kind of sound good through through whatever cab that you put them through. I've found that PV is definitely the exception to the cab rule, where a lot of amps really need to be paired with the correct cab in order to get great sounds out of them. I really have never found that to be a case with either of those amps. I feel like both of those amps just have this voicing that is so prominent that they're not picky about cabs. They sound like that amp no matter what cab you put them through. Now, obviously the speaker and cab is going to have an effect on the tone, but what I'm saying is it has less of an effect on those two amps than any other amps that I've tried. And for that reason, it makes them great as a budget option, because if you don't have a great cab, those amps are still gonna sound good, if not great. So yeah, those are always my two choices. The PV-XXX, which now sells somewhere between 500 to 700 used, depending on the condition. I've sold a couple of them recently for 650 bucks a piece, and they've sold very quickly, which leads me to believe that the prices are continuing to go up on them, unfortunately, because I used to buy them for like 300 bucks back in the day and sell them for $400, and even selling them for $400 was kind of a chore. So that just tells you how much the market has gone up on those. Honorable mentions would be the PV Ultra amp, which is the teal stripe version. Those, again, the prices are going up on those, but you can typically find them between $300 and $400 used, depending on the condition. Those amps, however, are pickier about cabs, and I've noticed more variance in how those sound, and it could be due to the age. I mean, those are a late 80s amp at this point, so they've been around for over 30 years, and components start to drift, but I digress. That's usually a great sounding high gain amp that actually is one of the few amps that I don't think that you need a boost out front, because when you clip that ultra gain switch, when you punch that into the circuit, it tightens the amp up significantly and kind of gives you a boosted type tone right in the box. So the old PV Ultra amps are fantastic values. The other amps, which are seemingly harder to find now than they used to be, are the Jet City amps, the JCA 50 and 100H and the HDM. I have 3 of the 50s right now, and every time I play them, I'm kind of just like, how do these sound this good? They just sound incredible. I know they were designed primarily by Mike Soldano in partnership with Doug and somebody else in the beginning, but they sound fantastic, and especially if you have an EQ pedal to put in the loop, that is one of the few amps where I really do think that it benefits from an EQ in the loop, because on their own, without the depth modification, they're lacking some low end, they're lacking some lower mids, they kind of are spiky in the mids and a little bit too bright and brash up top. But if you throw a 10 band or even a 6 band EQ in the loop of those, you can really kind of just fix that low end right off the bat. I've been playing that amp at Human Animal Practice, my 50H loaded with EL34s, for the last couple of weeks, and every time I play it, I can't believe how well it hangs with my other guitarist Rev E dual rectifier, and even some of the other amps that I bring to kind of play, because I always like having a couple amps at my disposal because I nerd out with gear every practice. But the 50H holds its own with much more expensive amps, and considering that they can be bought for $300 to $400 on the used market, they're a fantastic value. As far as cabinets, the Harley Benton 212 vintage with the vintage 30s in it, you're not gonna beat that value ever. The fact that you can get a brand new cab with 2 V30s in it for less than the price of the speakers themselves, you're not gonna find that anywhere else. And yeah, it has to be imported, but if you order just one of them, the shipping fees are not all that bad, and it comes in, I believe, under $300 after shipping and tax. So really, you're never gonna beat that. My other suggestion would probably be like the EVH 212 cabs. Those have gone up to $550, but still, they're a great value for what you get. You get Celestion speakers in an all birch box that is well constructed, looks great. So if you're not gonna do the Harley Benton route, that would be my second choice, because that's really the only 212 cab in the $500 range that comes with great speakers in it that I can think of off the top of my head. So one of those two, although I would gravitate towards the Harley Benton because I tend to prefer the V30s versus the H30 anniversary speakers in the EVH 212, and it comes in $200 cheaper. So how are you gonna beat that? All right, last question comes from my man, Barry Gomez. He asks, have you ever tried the plumes with the Mesa Badlander? With the way the plumes retains the low end, might be a good mix with the Badlander. Thanks for your question, man, and that's actually not a bad observation. I borrowed the plumes to do the video that I did with it way back at the beginning of my channel, so I haven't played it since then. I remember not being the biggest fan because it did retain a lot of low end, and it didn't seem to add any punch or anything like that. It just kind of colored the tone and added a little bit of output. So I know a lot of people are raving about that Overdrive right now, but it's not my favorite. But yeah, trying it on the Badlander might be a good combo, because that crunch channel does need an overdrive to get into the really high gain stuff. But if you put something like a TS9 or an SD1 in front of that channel, you're gonna thin it out, and it's already thinner than a rectifier is. So if you're going for those bigger high gain tones, you're gonna find it lacking in the low end, I'm sure. I personally think it's fine, but having more low end on tap to really suit the particular guitar or the particular cabinet, if something's lacking in low end in your whole signal chain, it's never a bad thing. So What I tend to gravitate towards on the Badlander are the Mesa Grid Slammer works fantastic on that because not only does it retain a lot of low end and have a good amount of output, but it doesn't add too much mid content. The crunch channel on the Badlander is already pretty mid forward, so you really don't need too many more mids added from the Overdrive. So the Grid Slammer works fantastic on that. Another option is the Walrus Audio Aegis pedal, and actually that's one of my favorite Overdrives at the moment just because the sheer amount of options on it. You can make that pedal work in front of just about any amp with the 5 different Overdrive modes. And it works really well on the Badlander because a couple of those modes actually retain, or you can even boost the low end on the pedal while still kind of retaining the tightness. So that is a huge benefit in my opinion, and the Aegis works great on the Badlander crunch channel. The final option that I would suggest would be the Electric Eye Mud Killer. I'm actually really beginning to like that pedal, especially not so much for the E standard stuff, but for drop tuning things, because it tightens things up and it adds mids in the right place to where they're not too harsh, and it makes the guitar kind of just cut through the mix a little bit better. A lot of TS9s, SD1s, I like the aggression of those style pedals for the E standard stuff, but like when you start to tune down, you want a little bit more of a broader mid push. At least I do personally, because I know I talked to Jason Frankhauser, Killer Tone Texas, and he said he liked the Mud Killer, but he kind of prefers the attack of like a TS9 style pedal. And I totally get where he's coming from, but if you tune down, I've noticed that the tight control on top of where the tone control adjusts the mids, you can get more low end by reducing the tight control, but still, it still kind of compacts it and makes the low end punchier. And then you add mids in the right place to where they're not so spiky and they're a little bit more rounded. And I think that that pedal would work great in front of the Badlander for those two reasons. So yeah, haven't tried the plumes, but a couple of other options there for you guys. If you have a Badlander, you want to boost the crunch channel, but you find it to be lacking a little bit of low end, maybe give one of those a shot. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me this week, guys. Thanks so much for your questions. But for next week, drop all of your questions down below in the comments. Really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with for me. Anyways, hit that like button on the way out, subscribe, hit the bell notification, check down in the description of the video for my Sweetwater affiliate links. Get yourself something nice and help me out at the same time. Consider becoming a Patreon member, joining my Discord group and my Facebook group and my group. I can't talk anymore. I'm just gonna end this video. Would love to have you guys around more often. Thanks so much, Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.